Be prepared for the relocation center, which is a pioneer community. Bring warm clothing even if you're going to a southern area, because the temperatures may range from freezing in winter to 115 degrees during some periods of the summer.
The impact to the Japanese American community from being incarcerated was immediate and devastating. Many families lost their homes, businesses, and even pets. However, the damage was not only monetary. Mako recalls one poignant conversation with her 80-year-old father.
And 40 years later, when my father is so deaf that he can't hear Japanese music anymore, he's telling me that, oh, Mako, I could hear my kids calling me. I could just stop and I could hear very clearly my kids calling me. And that made me really sad because he's so deaf he can't hear his music.
70 years later, I was traveling with a man that was incarcerated, and he's sitting down. And, I kept trying to tell him, want to get in line. And his reaction was, I stood in line so much in camp that I vowed I will never stand in line again.
I was the oldest in my family, and so I felt the responsibility of making sure that my mother, who couldn't speak English, will get the forms all filled out. And so after school, I would have to go with my mother to the government office and translate and interpret things for her. And for an 11-year-old, didn't even know what the words were in English. So I worried that what if I said the wrong things? Would we end up in jail or end up in a worse situation, not knowing even what incarceration, any of that words meant in English. I never heard those words like war. And so I'll never forget that. That was a very traumatic experience for me.
Feelings of shame and betrayal at the denial of civil rights lingered with the incarcerees throughout their lives. The feelings were so painful that most simply refused to discuss their experiences. The younger generations would often hear about the incarceration and then discover their parents and grandparents were survivors of the camps.
I think it was very hard for us to talk about right after we came out of camp. We were still hurting, and our parents wanted us to not stand out and be hurt more. Most of the Niseis at the time, the second generation, were still hurting from the experience.
For us and others of my age, we had to kind of dig a little bit to get any kind of information. They had good reasons for feeling that way, because I think they were in some way trying to protect us in a way from having to feel or think about it or deal with it, and let's just move on and we'll make a better life and hope that never happens again, kind of thing.
It's not the kind of thing where you can sit down and say, here, kids, sit down and this is what I'm going to tell you, the story of my incarceration. I mean, it doesn't happen that way.
It just seemed like within the community, there was a little bit of a reluctance to, massively come out and say, what can we do about it and all that. It was more of a feeling of, let's just try to forget about it and kind of, sweep it into the past a little bit.
So I grew up in kind of a rural section of New York, not in the city. And I think by having my parents and my relatives and ancestry being incarcerated, I think what that allowed to do is it gave a lot of the mostly white kids in my neighborhood and in the whole community, it gave them freedom to make fun of my sister and myself in elementary school. And I am 50-some years old and I can still hear those chants making fun of us.
My mom was like 6 months old when they were incarcerated, and then 4 or something when they were released. She talks about her separation. She never bonded with her dad. It took a long time for her to bond with her dad. And so she talks about that effect. It affected her psyche a lot. And then when I heard about the dreamers, when they were being separated from their parents and how that affects their bonding possibilities with their family, I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. My mom talks about this all the time. It's true. It's so true. Don't separate them from their parents, because this is, I know from firsthand experience, my mom talks about this. Don't do this. And they're doing it still again. And I'm like, I know, don't do it. Don't do it, because obviously it affected my mom's life. And so it affected me because it affected my mom.
I've got a lot of anger of how much was taken away from our grandparents and our parents and from us, that, you know, we never got the chance really to have the fun-loving Papu that, you know, he was before camp. I just feel like we were robbed of so much. And that's just us. I mean, that's not even, you know, the experience beyond just our family. But then when we go to, you know, what Laura's saying and how it's continuing to happen and how the country hasn't learned and it's still not enough, and what will it take?
You know, when I see this problem keep happening, you know, everyone's complicit if you let it happen.
The stories from the incarceration elicit varied responses from the younger generations. How should someone respond when finding out their own family was incarcerated simply because they had, in quotes, the face of the enemy?
Did anything kind of bubble to the surface when you were listening to them?
Anger.
Why you gotta stare at me when you say anger? Yeah, right? I started thinking more about stories. I struggled a lot. I just ended up tearing up and getting so frustrated and angry and sad. And I think about the stories that, you know, Mom shared about Papu and all the things that the family had lost and had gone through.
I mean, I'm angry like DeeAn, not quite like DeeAn, but I'm angry too. You know, like Laura also said, you know, just trying to make sure that these things don't exist down the road in the future, and, you know, making more people aware of these things.
I want people to know it in such a way that they believe it and that it is impactful to them, but ideally without the anger that I know that I hold to it. I know that as we become more distant from it, the anger will subside, but I gotta understand that part of that anger helps to keep it alive, because if I didn't feel as passionately about it, I wouldn't be pushing as hard or fighting as hard to keep it alive. And I want people to know the true story of it and not just the propaganda version.
Carrying the family's story is powerful. Stories easily become a burden when they're held inside. They might even feel painful. Sharing the stories opens doors for healing and empathy.
Telling these stories, getting them out there, keeping the stories alive through your families. How do you think that helps heal the wounds from the incarceration?
I think the healing part of it really exists more for people that went through it, and most of those people are gone now. And so if it has any healing at all, to me, I think most of it is probably going to be for those people, not me.
I'm not sure that the healing, this would help heal any wounds. I think the education will help people to become more aware of it and help stop the disinformation type of campaign that happens. I know there are people out there who swear that the Holocaust didn't happen and the incarceration didn't happen and all this other stuff. And if we can get some more literature and that kind of stuff out there and talk to people who've actually survived it, then hopefully we can turn some minds around before they become tarnished.
I actually disagree with you. Shocking, I know. No, I mean, it's not that you're wrong, I just disagree. I think there is healing that's going to happen from this, because when people are just bottling it up and holding on to it, it boils over. So the fact that people are talking about it now and that it is more open and that there's a safer place and a safer way to discuss it, I think does have some healing properties. I also don't know that I necessarily want it to be completely healing at this point. I do want it to be healing for the people who were there and affected by it, but I don't want the healing to be complete because then we wouldn't have learned from it. And it is more likely to continue if we don't learn from it. I know Mom would have been very happy that we did this. Intergenerationally, we were all able to gather and make time to be able to do this and put this together. As I'm sure you all have noticed during the course of the day, we're a close family. So having something that brought us all together and still will bring us all together, I think that's something that continues to affect me.